Hello everyone, this is my presentation for NUTR200 on vitamin A. So an introduction to vitamin A, it's a fat-soluble vitamin, meaning that it dissolves in fat, won't dissolve in water. There's preformed vitamin A, which is the retinoids. This consists of retinol, which is an aldehyde, retinol, which is an alcohol, and retinoic acid. And these are the biologically active forms of vitamin A, meaning that they don't have to be converted in the body before they can go on to perform their functions. Provitamin A is the carotenoids, and there are hundreds of kinds of carotenoids, but only 3 of them actually contain vitamin A activity. So those ones are beta-carotene, alpha-carotene, and beta-cryptoxanthin. And these have to be converted in the body before they can become biologically active. That's why they're a provitamin. So once they're in the body, I'll show it later, but once they're in the body, then they can become converted and be used to perform their functions. The RDAs for vitamin A for males is 900 micrograms and 700 for females. The upper levels of retinoids is 3,000 for males and 2,300 for females, and carotenoids haven't set a UL for it because it hasn't been seen as harmful to the body in high levels. Some of the major functions of vitamin A are growth and development, cell differentiation, vision, immune function, and protection from free radicals. With cell differentiation that occurs during embryonic development, immune function, retinol is required for maintenance of skin and mucosal cells in the immune system to protect against infection. It is also needed for the development of white blood cells and T lymphocytes. And then with protecting from free radicals, the carotenoids like beta-carotene have antioxidant properties, and so that helps there. And with vision, vitamin A becomes esterified to form retinol esters, which is then broken down to form 11-cis-retinol and oxidized to form 11-cis-retinol. And the 11-cis-retinol binds to opsin in the rod cell and becomes rhodopsin. The rhodopsin is then catalyzed to all-trans-retinol and is released as a signal to the optic nerve, which is then, the signal is then sent to the brain and conveyed as vision. So consuming more vitamin A will allow for more rhodopsin to be produced in or stored and used in the visual cycle, thus improving your night vision. It's also used in gene expression. So vitamin A that's stored in the liver is bound to retinol binding protein and is released into the blood and binds to prealbumin. Those proteins then transport it to the target cell, and it's then released into the cytosol, binding with a cellular retinol binding protein, which transports it to the nucleus. It then goes through the nucleus, and once it's in there, binds to RAR or RXR, which are nuclear retinoid receptors that have DNA binding sites on them. So those will bind to the vitamin A. Binding to those receptors activates them and allows them to be bound to the DNA, which then allows for gene expression and eventually proteins to be made. So some of the food sources, there's a lot of food sources. Retinoids are in animal products and carotenoids are in fruits and vegetables, mostly orange, yellow, red, and green fruits and vegetables. And then the animal products are in liver, fish, milk, eggs, and then margarines are also fortified with vitamin A. So its function in metabolism. So when retinoids are eaten, before they're absorbed, they have to have their fatty acid broken off. So then they can be absorbed into the enterocytes of the small intestine. And then carotenoids, like beta-carotene here in this example, is absorbed into the enterocyte and then has to be cleaved to become either retinol or retinoic acid, and then can eventually it will become retinol esters with the retinol, because the fatty acids will be reattached and the chylomicrons will take it up in the bloodstream. The chylomicrons will then transport it to the liver, where about 90% of our vitamin A is stored. And there it can go on to bind to the retinol binding protein and go through gene expression, like we talked about. It can also deliver to adipose tissue, kidneys, bone marrow, testicle, and eyes to go through the vision cycle and also to perform immune functions. So vitamin A deficiency is not common in North America, but it is worldwide. It is a leading cause for non-accidental blindness. About 500,000 children every year become blind in destitute nations. So there are a lot of different types of people that are at risk. So people that are impoverished, elderly people, alcoholics, individuals with liver disease, severe fat malabsorption, chronic diarrhea, pancreatic insufficiency, Crohn's disease, cystic fibrosis, AIDS, and premature infants are also at risk. So when an individual is deficient in vitamin A, the retinol isn't able to be stored in the eyes. The stores for the visual cycle are low and will result in night blindness because the retina cannot produce the rhodopsin as quickly as if someone had a normal levels of vitamin A. The Bidet spots, when carotenoids are absorbed by passive diffusion, they are cleaved to form the retinol or retinoic acid. When there are low amounts of the retinoic acid, the mucus-forming cells in the cornea deteriorate, which causes the eye to be dry, and gray foam and dried up epithelial tissues will build up on the eye, which is what you see in the picture. This will cause the cornea to continue to soften, and it will become scarred and will lead to permanent blindness. There's also follicular hyperkeratosis, and this is when the keratin protein builds up around hair follicles on the body, and will cause the skin to be really dry and rough and have a sandy texture. Impaired growth happens in children, so they recommend making sure that before a child is weaned off of breastfeeding or bottle feeding, that they have sufficient vitamin A. They're not deficient, because then that can cause that risk later in life. And then with infections, like I talked about, vitamin A is needed for the development of white blood cells and T lymphocytes, and also with the mucosal cells that line the immune system. And so when there's no vitamin A, those cells aren't being produced and developed, and so there's nothing there to fight the infection. With toxicity, there's 3 different kinds: acute, chronic, and teratogenic. With acute toxicity, it happens with one large dose of vitamin A, and about normally over 300,000 IUs of vitamin A. So to treat that, they normally just let it kind of wear off, because there's nothing really you can give someone. Some of the symptoms are mentioned here. The GI tract upset consists of nausea, vomiting, loss of appetite, and abdominal pain. There's also headache, intracranial pressure, blurred vision, dizziness, poor muscle coordination, rash, and then there is chronic toxicity, which it's when a large amount is taken, but it's repeated intakes of like 10 times what the RDA is. The treatment of that is mostly caused by a supplement, so it's just they recommend to discontinue the supplement. Some of the symptoms of that are like joint pain, loss of appetite, skin disorders, headache, reduced bone minerals, liver damage, double vision, hemorrhages, coma, possibly death, and then, like I have written here, that it also can cause damage to the bones and eyes. Teratogenic means monster producing. When this amount of vitamin A is taken up, it can cause birth defects like encephalus, microencephaly, malformations, so like cleft palate, and then malformations also in the cardiovascular system. And I think a lot of times with that you would just discontinue a supplement, or because I don't know how else they would be getting that amount. So my conclusion, I just thought of some recommendations for making sure that you're consuming enough vitamin A in your diet without having to use the supplemental form, because the actual dietary form is more bioavailable and is a lot better, more easily absorbed in the body. So some of the things I thought of was having tuna 2 to 3 times a week. 1 can of tuna is about 27 micrograms of vitamin A. And then having a salad that includes like spinach, carrots, kale, bell peppers. I found that red bell peppers, about 1 cup of them, 1 cup of chopped bell pepper is 1,400 micrograms of vitamin A, which is quite a bit, but it's not above the UL, so you'd probably be safe to have a cup of chopped bell pepper. And then also adding kale to smoothies, like a tropical smoothie that includes mangoes, peaches, apricot, pineapple. And in all my readings, I found that just having a well-balanced diet was the best way to be able to get enough of our vitamin A. There are so many different fruits and vegetables. I listed some of them in the video that are contain vitamin A, and there's lots of things now that we have that are fortified in vitamin A. A lot of cereals, breads, things like that. Margarine, that was one of them. So I hope you enjoyed it. I had a lot of fun learning about vitamin A, and it's really amazing how important this vitamin is for our bodies. I never realized, I knew they played a role in your eyes, but I never realized how big of an impact they could have on your immune system or gene expression, things like that. So it was really awesome to learn about it, and I hope you guys enjoyed it. Thanks.